So, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome everyone who is joining this fifth session of EARA's Roundtable series on regenerative agriculture. It's truly a pleasure and an honor to be here and to be able to host this space because we have, as always, an amazing set of guests this evening and super interesting topic to discuss, which is regeneration in science and policy making. Now, a reminder that this session is being recorded so you can watch it afterwards. And allow me to introduce myself and the team. My name is Ana Digon. I'm in charge of community care and process facilitation for EARA, and I'm part of this wonderful operations team of 5 people who are serving the community of farmers that have decided to create this European alliance to take the farmers' voices firmly and unitedly to all sorts of different spheres in Europe and in particular in Brussels as well. But those voices need to be heard everywhere, and more so nowadays when we have so many interconnected crises that are very much connected by the food system, the food production and the food consumption, the food distribution. All of that really is something that is connected to most of economic and social life in our countries nowadays. So farmers who are daring and who are brave to do things in a different way and to do it in favor of life and in favor of the people are really people that need to be listened to and honored and advised as well. And so it's great to have an amazing array of experts this evening to discuss this important side of things, which is science and policy making. So my name is Ana Digon, that's my role in EARA, and we have with us today as well Simon Kramer, a policy steward and advisor, and also Virginia Tarditi, wonderful multitasking person in the team, and who are the 2 people behind this roundtable series. So thanks to both of them for really organizing and weaving all of this for all of us. So with that, and before we give the welcome to each of our guests today, I'd like to just do a little bit of housekeeping and share with you the group agreements that we always have in EARA meetings. Now, EARA was officially founded a year ago after about a year and a half of work and many decades of work by many people. And we have been, since it was founded, and it is farmer-led, which means only farmers get a vote in the decisions of EARA. We have been organized in all sorts of different working groups and different working spaces. And in all of those online spaces, we always share and cultivate the following group agreements that we will show you now, if you would like, please, Virginia. And so we share these with you. They're very useful for any group you're in, but especially in spaces like this. So our rules of engagement: speak and listen with respect. Always, we're all different and everyone's coming from the right place for them. So just listen with respect, even if you don't agree, and also speak with respect, knowing that, you know, this is your truth. It may not be everyone else's. To please keep external noises off by having your microphone on mute while you're not speaking. Be punctual. Thank you, everyone, for that. We like to identify problems and focus our time and energies on looking for solutions so that it doesn't become a complaints party, but rather a solutions celebration. Yeah. To be concise. So when you do speak, you know, hit it on the head. Don't repeat what was already said, and just really, you know, try and bring some new stuff into the room. And these 2 final ones are really, really deep because the African word Ubuntu, I am because we're part of a larger human community, and we are not islands. We're connected to all of that human community. We're brothers and sisters on this amazing ship that is flying through the universe. And so let us see each other as those brothers and sisters and feel stronger because we belong to that bigger community. And mudita is a Buddhist concept, very elevated, which is difficult to practice, but we invite everyone to do so, which is that we all are connected to a higher intelligence, light, spirit, life, whatever you want to call it. And she shines through us. And when someone has a great idea or a great contribution, it's because of the wonderful space we all create together that allows that shine to come through. And so it's our collective shine coming through one person and everyone else holding the space for that shine to come. So when somebody shines, it's my shine, it's our shine. And that's a really wonderful way to build together and construct things together and just increase the level of the conversation and of the exchange. So I invite you all to embrace these rules of engagement. And also we suggest that people, as we always do, and this is wonderful, it's super interesting to have everybody who would like to write your name and your country and your occupation. And if you want, your LinkedIn or whatever other way of connection with you that you would like to share. Now, this is only for the people who are live, because afterwards in the recording, it doesn't actually share the chat. So this is something exclusive for you people who are live to really be able to connect with each other. So make the most of that and let us know who you are, where you are. We've had people, I don't know if he's here today, but we've had people from New Zealand and people from across the ocean and people from all sorts of countries and regions in Europe as well. So most welcome. Welcome everyone, wherever you are. And if you're watching this afterwards, then thank you for taking the time as well to listen to this. And if you have any questions, please write them in the chat so we don't forget them, you don't forget them. And it will be really great to be able to then curate those questions into the conversation. And we really make a good effort of doing that. So please feel free to write your questions as well as they come up. If we have time at the end, we will offer you to speak, but sometimes we don't have time. And today we have 6 incredible guests. It's amazing, once again, what Simon and Virginia have brought together. Thank you. And with that, I welcome all the guests. They will be introducing themselves in a moment. And so with that, I'm going to pass it on to Simon to give us the context of the conversation today and then lead on to our wonderful speakers.
Thank you so much, as always, for this wonderful introduction, Anna, and for your work in helping our struggling sisters and brothers in Valencia. Tonight we have a session with extremely qualified people, to which I'm personally also very excited about. Thank you so much for making the time of coming. In general, the framing of tonight's session is, in terms of Regenerative, we always talk about the transition and how to enable the farmers to transition. I think it's also high time that we learn from our most advanced peers in the science and policy community on how we can change the ecosystems there to enable ever more scientists and policymakers to do what the pioneers in those spaces are doing and to create the enabling environments and for everyone else to work with nature for holding systems regeneration. And tonight we'll go through our amazing guests. We will start as usually by them self-introducing their own life journey and regeneration journey. And we have Andrea, who's working for the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. We have Dawn Cox from the US, who is also working, I think, at countless private and public fronts. And we have Jan Wouter, Jan Schouten. Sorry, please help us with your name once you are on, who's leading an amazing project in the Netherlands. We have Rachel Kramer, who is just published a wonderful paper on the new possibilities and opportunities in governance. And then we have 2 wonderful of our founding farmers. One is Lukas Kohl, who's himself also an aspiring scientist, and Yuso, who is the same and also works for different organizations. And they will introduce themselves. I would say the one who had the longest space to travel, Dawn. How about you start by introducing yourself to us?
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here and address and to be able to tell a little bit of the journey here, because I feel like we really are at an inflection point in the conversation about regeneration and soil health and in agriculture in general, and its role in defining who we are within our environment and how we organize and collaborate together, both in autonomy and food and data sovereignty, but also how we're managing our shared resources globally. So again, Doran Cox, I am a farmer, grew up on a family farm on the east coast of the US, just north of Boston on the seacoast. I continue to live and work there. But I also spent about a decade in technology and finance after being going through Cornell University, focusing on international agriculture and rural development, which was a really interesting time, recognizing the real failures of agriculture and the approach to export agriculture that really focused on international ag and rural development at the time. So I essentially launched my career, coming from an idealistic small-scale agricultural background, into the failures of the Green Revolution and being told that the discipline was broken and good luck. And I came back to do my graduate work and got my PhD in natural resource and earth system science after having seen and being exposed to the successes of large-scale collaborative efforts that resulted in the formation of the internet and open source tools and technology. That was a great inspiration. And so from that moment, it's been really a series of explorations about recognizing that what does it look like to engage in agriculture as this multi-generational shared human endeavor, a system science and applied science that requires, again, both individual enterprises and autonomy, but also those aspects of that are really part of the global commons. And so the first endeavor was really the formation of applying that in my own farming and recognizing that in order to create the best agriculture for our area really required collaboration and access to knowledge that was not necessarily at hand from the conventional places. And so that was the genesis of the Farm Hack project, to say, what does it look like to share open source solutions and create innovation and build on the work of others. And then through that process, really recognizing that this has a deep history in agriculture, in discipline, and that really the proprietary nature of sharing agricultural knowledge is really a relatively new phenomenon. That seed saving itself is a form of knowledge sharing, generational knowledge sharing. But the same is true of the evolution of the tools and technologies and the knowledge, the cumulative knowledge that we have about what works where. That's both location specific, but also generalizable. And so Farm Hack was a first focus around open source tools and hardware and tools and technology. But from that, recognizing and my graduate work focusing particularly on sharing soil health management planning processes, and how do we share that kind of information, the really applied science, the science of adaptive management, of where every farm becomes essentially your own research farm that you are using to gathering baseline information about what works, but also tracking change over time and being able to share that with others. And so that was the genesis of the FarmOS software platform, which has then, which is now, fast forward, the foundation for data collection for conservation innovation grants around the country in the United States under USDA. It's the foundation for Rothamsted research long-term trials at this point. The data structure is being used in multiple ways at much larger scales, but it started with really that core idea FarmOS was sort of a first foray into applying it into software that was then connected also with public laboratory and some of the public science communities, and also aligned with a project that came out of CERN in terms of large scale. What does large scale collaboration for open science look like? And there was a launch around 2016, 2015 of the Gathering for Open Science hardware, which was hugely inspirational, and I think important from an agricultural perspective of recognizing the intersections between public science and applied science. And so we, from that, launched the Gathering for Open Ag Technology. I'm actually calling today, not from my home farm, but from a gathering in California, which I think is the fourth GOAT, as we call it, Gathering for Open Ag Tech. That was sort of an effort to really create a community of practice around applying these concepts and bringing them out into the world and creating a collaborative structure. And from GOAT, we started to ask the question, how might we scale the process of a public science project, and what does that look like? We've certainly seen examples of the Human Genome Project or other public science projects like deep space exploration, where we all have a human interest in the outcome. But from an agricultural perspective, recognizing that for that knowledge to be useful, we have to make it applicable, and it has to be democratized and participatory. And so that was the genesis for launching Open Team, or Open Technology Ecosystem for Agricultural Management. And we worked with the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research to provide matching funds and grow a coalition of now more than 70 organizations to participate in, to work towards those common goals and create an interoperable ecosystem of tools and technologies to create the communities of practice to actually apply them and to share that knowledge while maintaining our individual food and data sovereignty. So I think I'm probably getting close to over time, but I'll just mention that we're at an inflection point with that concept, and recognizing that any of these efforts as they scale up, really we're seeing the need as we're this tension in creating policy and systems and tools and technologies that are really not just about the technology. It's also social and legal and technical structures and governance structures to allow for that, both that solidarity with those globally, and that we're supporting those shared outcomes, and also maintaining our individual autonomy and data sovereignty and food sovereignty as being core. And so we've started to organize an assembly called the Grassroots Innovation Assembly that met in Rome for the last year to organize entities like GOAT and like FarmHack and Open Team with other efforts like the Honeybee Network in India, or La Capé in Canada, or L'Atelier Paysan in France, to align these efforts in solidarity and to create a charter that allows that lays a way for us to contribute to one another's efforts. And so we're proposing, or I'm in the process right now of drafting a draft for an agricultural knowledge commonwealth, similar to the charter for the forests or a charter for the oceans, but recognizing that an intellectual commonwealth exists, but has yet to be truly codified. And it has two main principles. One, that everyone everywhere should have access to the best possible knowledge to improve their environment, communities, and livelihoods. And two, that that cannot be at the expense of food or data sovereignty, and that participation in that commonwealth needs to be voluntary and non-coercive. And so those two core principles, I think, are really, to me, key to advancing this work and moving forward. and happy to engage in this dialogue with this fantastic panel and expanding, growing community, and just see, it's so gratifying to see the acceptance and engagement of the concept of regeneration itself as both a science, but also a recognition of the environmental and social regeneration that needs to happen every generation. And
Thank
just
you.
a quick, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Don. So hopefully we can come back to you with some juicy questions as well. Please, if you can, and if you cannot because you're in the field, then afterwards perhaps, or if those who do have the links to everything that you are sharing, which are such interesting, important resources, would be great to have them in the chat. If there's somebody who can do that, because I see you're in the field, so you probably can't, then please put your hand up to that and say, hey, I'm going to put the links in the chat, because I'm sure everybody would like to have those. And just so you all know that we're doing a collection of resources and recommendations from all of our speakers and all of our farmers and anyone who can add information that is useful. So this was a request from a couple of sessions ago, and we're working on that so that people can be adding all this information. We will be adding everything that you share as well in this chat. So please do share all these wonderful links. So every one of you deserves a whole full session and more to tell us everything that you do. But in the interest of time, we are going to ask you, I'm sorry to be the shepherd in this respect, but to briefly introduce yourselves next so that we can then engage in conversation. So tell us in a couple of minutes, what are the key things that you would like to say about yourself and your journey? Simon, who would you like to ask next?
The man whose name I still have to learn. So, wow.
You mean me? My name is Wouter Jan Schouten. You can also say Walter. I'm the program director of Regenerative, which is a program in the Netherlands that is just starting up, aimed at accelerating the development of a regenerative agriculture, but also a profitable agricultural sector in the Netherlands. Let me start a bit with talking about my journey. I have a long background as a business consultant at the Boston Consulting Group, where I've worked with many of the large multinational food companies like Unilever. And where I was brought up in say the efficiency paradigm, thinking that being most efficient in food production leads to the to the smallest footprint and least damage. So that's where I come from. After leaving BCG now more than 10 years ago, I started working the second half of the career at WWF, the World Wide Fund for Nature, where I learned a lot about ecological impact of agriculture. And there, I think the paradigm shift in my mind started. And the seed for, net positive or regenerative was planted in my head, thinking like we cannot, just doing less harm is not good enough, and we need to get to agricultural systems that are in harmony with nature and also regenerate ecosystem services. Since 2016, I'm active in public-private innovation partnerships, so working with knowledge institutes, science institutes, and private companies, most often government-funded, or at least to a large extent government-funded. And in 2018, we started the first project on Regenerative, with the question if we would get to a net positive agriculture system at the scale of the Netherlands, what would that look like? What are the requirements? And what do we see from farmer initiatives in the Netherlands? And how do they relate to those required outcomes of what would be a net positive or regenerative system? And we, based on that, also formed a small network of about 20 farmers in the Netherlands that are pioneering regenerative agriculture, often for quite a long time already. 1.5 years ago, we submitted the proposal, the Regenerative proposal, which is funded by the Dutch government, to really accelerate the transition towards regenerative agriculture. And that program is actually starting now. We set it up around 4 barriers that we identified together with these farmers. And I'll briefly summarize them. So what you basically see is, and I'm sure that will be very similar in other countries, is that there are quite a number of farmers that are pioneering regenerative practices and quite successful with that, and also have their revenue model well functioning. They have a number of things in common. They are very entrepreneurial. They often have a revenue model that is dependent on a price premium or on a lot of volunteers work. It has taken a long transition time, and there's a lot of trial and error and unpredictability in the outcomes of the practices that they pioneered. And based on that, we basically said there are 4 barriers that we want to overcome with the Regenerative program. One is we need to have sight on a mainstream revenue model that is not dependent on a heavy price premium. Secondly, the transition costs for the farmer need to be, well, we need to find ways to finance transition for a farmer. There need to be more predictability in outcomes if we want to get to more repeatability of regenerative farm models, and knowledge should be much better shared, and there should be much and spread in the sector. So based on that, we've set up a program with the objectives to work with pioneering farmers and develop repeatable regenerative farm models with a good revenue model. Secondly, to support 1,000 farmers in the Netherlands, which is about 2% of the farmers today, in a transition to a regenerative farm model. Thirdly, to work on measuring, monitoring, modeling, and based on that, be able to reward. And that's maybe something that Rachel will also touch upon, who is also involved in the program. And then, fourthly, to train 10,000 farmers and future farmers and farm advisors, also very important, in regenerative agriculture. And by that, lay the foundation to make it the new normal in the next decade. We do that in a program from 3 perspectives. So the farmer perspective, the geographic or landscape perspective, and then the bigger system perspective, where the farmers are in the lead. So in our steering committee, well, it's not that only farmers have a vote, but they do have the majority vote in the steering committee of this program. And these are large farmer cooperatives as well as small grassroots networks of farmers. We will also bring that together in a number of example landscapes in the Netherlands, where we will also look at what's a good mix of different farm models, where we can also deliver on the geographic challenges that are there, and of the ones that know the Netherlands a bit, we are, it's a very crowded country, and our environmental challenges are quite huge, on biodiversity, on nitrogen cycling, on climate, obviously. And we think, so we will work in different regions in the Netherlands in how can we solve that, from a farm perspective, building up to the geographic perspective. And then we have a consortium of over 50 partners now, value chain partners, financing companies, and the Dutch Ministry of Agriculture, who are also collaborating in this consortium to define and develop models that enable the transition from a farmer perspective. So that's that's both on financing models, on valorization models, in international value chains, in local value chains towards retail, in short local chains, and also working on what we could say an integrated value language that at least all these partners in a consortium start measuring the same things and the same indicators for outcomes, and along the same structure of what are practices, what are indicators, what are outcomes that we need to achieve. So that, well, we don't invent that company by company, but really work on that together. Let me pause there as for my introduction.
Thank you, Wouter. Thank you very much. I would say we'll stay in the Netherlands and go to Rachel. Unfortunately, our only woman tonight on the panel, for which I think we owe an apology. Please, Rachel.
Well, first of all, thank you, Simon. Thank you, Virginia, for inviting me to join the panel discussion this evening. I'm Rachel Creamer. I'm Professor of Soil Biology at Wageningen University. But I didn't start out life as a soil biologist. I actually really developed as a soil scientist and learning about the different soils that developed in different landscapes across the UK. I'm originally from England, and also across the world. And in part of my journey in doing that, I started to see that many of the processes that were taking place in soils was really being driven by the biology that existed within these soil environments and these different biomes. And so I became quite fascinated with, well, what is the biology doing and how can we measure and assess that? And actually, more importantly, how can we use that to really monitor what's happening to the soil and the changes that we're placing upon the soil ourselves through management, through land use change, for example. And what does that impact mean in terms of the way that the soil works and behaves? So I really got into the topic of biological indicators for soil quality at the time, which soon developed into the topic of soil health. And now I'm very deeply involved in many different projects dealing with the topic of soil health and how we can monitor and assess that. So I'm involved at a European level in a project called Benchmarks, which is defining how can we measure soil health from the local scale up. So really looking the opposite to the soil monitoring and resilience directive. Instead of from the top down, we really look from the local scale up. And we really believe that context is very important in understanding what's happening to our soils. But as Wouter mentioned, I also lead Line 3, which is within the Regenerative project, which will be looking how can we take our knowledge so far that we've developed in quite mainstream agricultural systems and actually further develop that and underpin that scientifically to understand how we can do this in more regenerative systems. And that's complicated because that really means dealing with a diversity of different practices, a diversity of different uses of the land within a small space, different business models being integrated, and actually how can we utilize that knowledge to also help support the development of the socioeconomic component of regenerative systems as well. So we will monitor it, underpin it scientifically, but we'll also model it, and we will use this information to help us value it. And that will be done with these 1,000 farmers across the Netherlands. But we start actually with 100 pioneer farmers within the project, where we really deeply look at the different systems that they're applying and how we can understand them. I'll leave it there. I'll keep it short and simple.
Wonderful, Rachel. Thank you. Lucas, you want to go next?
Yeah, hello everybody. Yeah, also trying to make it short. And yeah, I am coming from a farm. I'm working on a farm for parents. And yeah, I grew up here with dairy cows, with organic farming since over 30 years by now. And also we always had yeah, crops growing like spelt and sunflowers and legumes and yeah, everything you can imagine. We had also vegetables. And yeah, what we're doing now is we're trying to implement more and more regenerative practices. Or we did already. We're doing it yeah, since more than 5 years. that all started with me, actually, because I was studying in Vienna at the University of Life Science, and I got pretty deep into this whole thing about, can we make the soil more fertile by different practices? Can we do it even faster than the science is telling it to us? And can we, form humus in soil much faster? And yeah, after my studies in Vienna, I started a project which has a focus on regenerative farming practices, actually. So we're comparing normal organic farming practices with plowing and all that stuff to regenerative practices, but not only like plowing or not plowing, we're doing it as a system. So yeah, we do cover cropping, we do reduced tillage, we do application of biochar. Now I'm in a new project where we have perennials growing on strips on fields, so like for agroforestry. And yeah, we really want to know, can we do it? Can we get the soil much faster fertile than we think with those regenerative practices? And also, what's really important for us is we're doing it together with the farmers, though on my farm, but on other farms as well. What we're seeing is that not everything works as we saw it before. So the transition time, what there has been already talked about, is quite hard. And we also look on the financial part, and the economics in the transition time does not look always that good, because you have more effort, you have not necessarily higher yields. You will have it maybe after 3 or 4 years, that's what we figured out, but not at the beginning. So it somehow needs an acknowledgement of what the farmers are doing. And that's the point actually where we got stuck somehow. Well, what else? Yeah, what my focus is on also is that I'm trying to develop measurements for farmers, but also for science, how we can more accurately measure soil organic carbon in soils. And also, are there tools for farmers to see, is their soil fertile? Is it healthy or not? So simple tools like the Haney soil health test that we modified a bit, and also tests on nutrient balance in soil, where I also did my thesis about. And yeah, so I'm also an advisor for farmers in terms of soil testing. So yeah, that's about what we are doing and where we are staying right now at my place.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lucas. Bodenbalance. I think we can also put some of those links in the chat. And Huso, tell us about your journey in the Nordics.
Hello, you all. If you want to have it short, I can say that I'm a Nordic version of Lucas, actually. But if I may have a couple of more words, I'm a regenerative farmer and agronomist in our family farm in southeast Finland, close to Lake Saimaa, the biggest lake in Finland. And on our 140 hectares, which are mostly clay soils, we grow organic arable crops like cereals, pulses, oil seeds for the seed production and food. Diverse grasslands play a key role in our crop rotation, consisting around 50% of the total area. They are not harvested, only mulched for the underground cattle. During the summer, we have also some sheep to take care of the traditional forest meadow biotype. On the fields, we lean on continuous crop cover, minimum tillage, organic fertilization. Our yields are relatively good compared to conventional farmers around here. That means around 3 to 4 tons per hectare. But we aim to increase yield by continuously improving soil health. And we aim to very high resource efficiency anyway. Most challenges in the production relates to the perennial weeds like thistle, dandelion, and couch grass. But we are learning to cope with them. Forests are also important for the Finnish farms, and we have around 80 hectares laurel, spruce, and birch forests that we manage with continuous cover management, meaning harvestings and natural regeneration, trying to avoid clear cuts. And in principle, it's very analogical to the regenerative agriculture. In addition to farming, I do also advisory, education and research. In 2018, we started in the Baltic Sea Action Group, which is a private foundation, the Carbon Action Project, which aims to enhance soil carbon sequestration and biodiversity in agriculture. And the core of the Carbon Action Project is that it brings together farmers, researchers, and policymakers. And nowadays, Carbon Action is the main advocate of regenerative agriculture in Finland. My journey towards regenerative agriculture started in early 2000 when I took over or began to be responsible of our family farm. And then I recognized that the limiting factor of productivity and quality of life actually was soil health. After only 3 decades of monoculture farming, our clay soil structure was quite bad. It was kind of collapsed, and the amount of organic matter was very low. So the soils didn't stand weather, I would say, in many ways. But then I found holistic management and later regenerative agriculture, and with this approach, we've developed a thriving farm and environment to live. But still, there is of course lots to do to regenerate the environment. On our farm, we do also on-farm trials, and we participate in several research projects relating regenerative agriculture and soil improvement. And I see on-farm trials very important tool to participate farmers to research to make agricultural science more relevant. And having said that, I'm very happy to be part of EARA and this webinar tonight with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juuso. Now that we all know each other in the chat, in the call, I think we can go a little bit into kind of a harvesting of your experiences, both in changing and observing the change in the thinking.
Oh,
in
Simon,
the
I
science.
think
Sorry,
I
Andrea.
did not
Yes,
present myself, but
absolutely. Brother, I'm so sorry, man.
no, I will
Please
be
go
short.
ahead.
I mean, I can be short.
Oh,
I'm
you
not-
will. Please.
No
Sorry.
problem. So yeah, no, okay. I'm Andrea Schiavano from. I work now at the JRC, the European Commission, and I'm a researcher. I have always wanted to be a farmer, but I think since the very beginning I realized it's too complicated to be a farmer. So I started to be a researcher. I mean, it's easier, I think, than being a farmer, because the more I go, the more I'm sure that being a farmer is really probably the most complicated job ever, because you have to have and especially when we talk about regenerative farming, sustainable farming, any kinds of farming that is not reductionist, right? It's really you need to have so many skills. You have to really embrace so many perspectives of ecology, of social science, of I don't know, many, right? And so that's why I decided to be a researcher, which is much easier. And well, I started as an environmental engineer, which is even easier because you are in this you know, reductionist perspective where technology will solve the problems of the world, which is not true. Why? I mean, it's one tool you can have, but then I had a PhD in agriculture ecology, and then you start understanding a bit more. I've been working quite a lot at the University of Milan in Italy. I was working in soil chemistry and soil science, and I was a lot in working with farmers about farming sustainability, and like, indeed the whole thing was reducing impacts somehow, which is really reductionist as a perspective, and as a is but most people still have this perspective. I mean, we don't really go outside this box yet. It's really few years where people really start thinking differently and saying, okay, we actually don't really need only to mitigate. We need to build back again the ecosystem and be involved in the ecosystem. Yeah, now I'm after several years working in the University of Milan. I was also teaching agriculture pollution control. I mean, all this kind of circular economy thing, but really this new perspective that has been coming out in these latest years. This I think the way forward. The problem is, I think we need more science into this journey, because unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, but people now, when you speak to people, you need evidence, right? You need to show what you can do with an approach or another approach and compare approaches. And this, I think, is super important. And so in these years here at the JRC, I've been actually working on this. So I've been working on collecting evidence regarding farming practices and farming systems. And we have been really recently publishing a first paper out presenting quite a broad data set available, or let's say that basically report the evidence that is out regarding the environmental, climate, etc. effects of different practices, right? On a very large share of the practices that are of interest in the policy context, but also in the scientific context as well. Yes, I will share the paper now here. It's really just a first step, because it's a data paper, so it's presenting the data set. Now we are, of course, trying to come out as soon as possible with really some insights and analysis. And maybe we can speak about this later in the upcoming discussion. But yes, okay. I think that's all now. Sorry for.
No, thank you for interrupting and introducing yourself. I think was basically also a perfect opening speech, because for the discussion in the terms of how.
Yeah, so Simon, I just have to add one detail, which tonight I'm somehow here on my personal ground. I'm not really representing the European Commission. That should be clear. But of course, I am a researcher that is working for the European Commission right now. Okay.
For sure. In terms of how these reductionistic mindsets and approaches in science and policy making are evolving, and I think you all are trying to change and have, if not the greatest experience, or a huge knowledge and experience in how those are developing and changing, and what might be still the biggest hurdles in changing it faster and basically scaling out our insights of overcoming the reductionistic look to all our other colleagues in science and policy making. And I want to start by asking Dawn, you are in the US now also involved in a big public program with the Climate Smart Egg, I think it's called. Maybe you can share a little bit of your learnings of that program, and also how do you think, like you talk and work a lot on data sovereignty, how do you think that can be connected also in science and policy making and be included by people who take and process the data in a sense that's fostering future emergence?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Partnership for Climate Smart Commodities is a U.S. Department of Agriculture program where they took money that would otherwise be going towards more sort of crop insurance and put about 3 billion into about 140 projects. It's actually more like, and they've just done a couple rounds now, so it's more than that. And the intent of that is to begin to create the measurement, reporting and verification for products that have climate smart attributes, and not necessarily to put them into environmental market, but to recognize that there is value to the production processes and the public value, and find ways to quantify that and create incentive programs to create additional, more of products that are benefiting the environment through agriculture. Our particular project has two components, and I would, and again, we're always highly collaborative, so we're written into several others, but actively working on a couple aspects ourselves, which are really focusing on that the measurement, reporting, and verification that we're using to advance our soils models, our biogeochemical models to make those environmental claims should be the outcome of the management planning process. So exactly what the last speaker was mentioning is like, how are we quantifying, creating a baseline documentation, but making our management decisions in a way that we can make a claim for ourselves, for our own management purposes, but be able to then share that information, both not only to researchers, but also to incentive programs and other markets that value that. Just really, and that we should be able to enter that. A key part of our technology investment is that the data that's generated there should be able to be entered once, controlled by the farmer, and have attribution for the creation of that data, both the outcome, but also control of how that data is shared. And that's really important to be able to start to aggregate results and compare them, and to be able to, over time, so that benchmarking function, but also creating a land, the ability to be able to recognize that change over time, even as land changes hands, even as producers move on or the businesses change. So creating a way in which that information stays as part of the attributes of that land. So if you think about a registry of deeds for the metes and bounds or the rights on that land, that we begin to create well, a cadastre, but it's basically that registry for those attributes and the claims related. So that's our project is really focused on creating the public infrastructure to support that process, and what we're calling a fair tech registry for the tools that enable that, or that are findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And then actually testing incentive programs on the ground with producers to implement it. So that's in process. So I don't want to overrepresent the stage of development, but that's the framework in terms of the work that we're actually implementing now with real dollars. And in the US context, I believe that this will survive the administration change, but through the Inflation Reduction Act, there's another $19 billion that is responsive, that needs to be spent in agriculture related to transformation, to science, towards environmental, towards climate smart agriculture. And a lot of the non-government institutions and research communities are seeing this as a generational investment to collect not just carbon data, but the other environmental data, the biodiversity data, the water quality and quantity, while we support, again, farmers in collecting that all the information about the co-benefits to really create a data set that's, again, first and foremost useful for the producers, but also advances our shared understanding of the benefits and challenges. So that was a lot, but thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I could keep asking all night. I also want to invite everyone from the panel, if you have, as Andrea already and fully rightfully did so, engage in directly with each other. Doesn't only need to be me asking questions. So if you heard something of interest,
yeah, that's what I was thinking about. Actually, I was thinking, asking Dorn, I mean, about data, because we're talking about data, and only in the end of your speech, Dorn, I understood we were talking about outcome data. So environmental outcome, biodiversity, carbon, blah blah blah. So the question is, but do we have already a nice framework of metrics and indicators that are really easy to measure and viable to measure? And how do you measure? Do you measure in the field? Do you measure through satellite imagery, etc.? Do we have a standard? I think this is really the key, not only regionally but worldwide, I would say, or at least in this movement, right? I mean, to really demonstrate an ecological transition, we need the data, and we need actually to be consistent, to use the same language, the same metrics, the same indicators, and the way we take this data, and we also how we elaborate the data to give a message on the overall transition, right?
I will give, I think Rachel wants to come back on it. I would have asked her too, because they also doing data in the benchmarks program in a context specific way.
Maybe Dorn wants to answer first, I don't know, and then I can come in.
Oh, I would just say amen to that. That's very much the motivation, but recognizing that often there's an agreement that we need standards, and often and we need more standards, and often the cliche is that when that happens, we end up with one more standard as opposed to sort of unified. So what we've really recognized is the importance of a social and governance structure that allows for disciplines to build off their standards for their discipline, but still have a common trunk. But it's a lot of coordination and social processes between researchers and farmers and industry to develop that. But it's a huge part of the work that Open Team is engaged in, both internally within U.S. Department of Agriculture and the vocabulary around soils mapping and soil health vocabulary and electronic we have a MODIS standard for soil health information to be able to share lab data in a consistent format, even when you have different field methods, even if you have different lab methods, to be able to begin to create standards for aggregating it. But also the other piece of this is the common farm conventions for sharing the practices that happened on the land. Because when we're talking about a biogeochemical model or sharing what worked, it's not just the change in the environmental outcomes, but what did you do to affect that change in a common format? So that's been a big part of our work. Again, developing and working with what they call in the USDA, it's another acronym, but Conservation Evaluation Monitoring Activity. But it is their method of documenting those standards. Now we're adding the data standards in addition to the protocol standards. But they have to be adaptive to the community. So it's not just setting it, because that doesn't work either. It's a very dynamic social process from our perspective.
Maybe I can jump in now. Yeah. It's an interesting debate, because should we have a data-driven approach where we can truly monitor and sort of check and know that we can sort of quantify and refer to, but then if we really have that data-driven approach, it's not always those simple techniques, because we have to. You said you were a soil chemist, Andrea. You know, we have to do the laboratory approaches. There's many different methodologies we can use. We can use pedotransfer functions. We can do calculations, but you know, if we're going to do it properly, we need to do it laboratory wise. Actually, for me, the most important thing is that it has to be meaningful, because if it's not meaningful, it's not adoptable. And it doesn't mean anything back to the users of the information. So defining the purpose for setting up a framework for monitoring is categorically the #1 priority. I see so often that we have companies or scientists or policies who say we need to collect data, but they don't know why they need to collect data. They just want to collect data. And then they say, well, we have to come up with indicators. Which indicators should we use? And I keep repeating back, what is your question? Because if you don't know the purpose of collecting, what the data collection is for, then you end up with meaningless data. And I think that I often see, well, if we collect this standard set of data, this simplified set of data, a minimum data set, for example, many different people can use it. But actually what happens in the end is that many different people don't know how to use it because they didn't set the purpose for it in the first place. So it becomes meaningless. The number of times I go out to farms and the farmers say to me, well, I got given this data because I participated in a research project, but I don't know what it means, because nobody's ever explained what it means for my context, for my situation. So I do think when we're starting to talk about collecting data and setting up monitoring frameworks, we have to ask those questions first, and we have to know why we're collecting it and also the context that we're collecting it for. I could go on and on, but I'll stop there.
Maybe you can just give us 2 words on how you're trying to put that into practice in benchmarks.
Okay. Yeah, so what the paper that I shared with you earlier on and sort of the framework that we're developing for benchmarks and then we'll apply in the ReGNL project is really defining, first of all, the setting, so the context. Where are you? What landscape are you in? What climate region are you in? What kind of agricultural business model are you applying? So that you really understand the setting. And then from there, we work with the farmers to actually define goals and objectives related, in this case, to their soil health, but it can be to other aspects as well, other goals. But it doesn't just have to be with farmers. So we can do the same with value chains. You can do the same with policy initiatives, where you sit down and say, okay, well, what are your goals and objectives that you would like to achieve? And then we define with them, okay, how can we assess this over a given timescale? From a farmer's perspective, if they want to, for example, understand that applying several new regenerative practices or several new practices in a regenerative system, how that's going to have an implication, then they might want to understand, well, how is the biodiversity in my soil changing over time? Or how do I see improvement in my water regulation, my soil structure, for example, over time? And so what we then do is that once we understand the practices that applied, we can work with them to define what we call result-based indicators, which are indicators that give the idea of the direction that the intervention takes you in for that given goal or objective. So if you want to improve your soil structure, and if therefore you've decided to reduce the tillage, your tillage as a way to get in that direction, then the farmers can go out and they can evaluate that. And there's actually many field-based methods to help do that. But of course, you can also then have the outcome-based methods, Andrea, that you referred to earlier on. And these are absolutely critical to actually then be able to benchmark, has that goal been reached or not? So that's what we're setting up, is this kind of systematic framework that allows for a local level assessment, but also then allows for that benchmarking program that then can be utilized to also inform other users how you are, whether you've reached your goal or not, and whether you're hitting those targets that you may be setting, for example, with the value chain that you're working with.
Thank you, Rachel. I was in a call earlier today with Ion Codesco from DG Envy and on our by now soil health or soil resilience and monitoring law, and it sounds so much like if we would have just preached this 6 years ago, maybe we would be somewhere else now. Mark, I see also you have your hands raised. I think we can be completely adaptive. Please come in and contribute.
Actually, Rachel, it was very much the question I was going to ask, right? As a scientist as well, the relevance of data is only as relevant as it's sort of used, right? Because there's a lot of great research out there in all sort of fields, but in particular in this is so important for it to be applicable and understandable and meaningful. And so you've answered quite a lot, but I was very curious from other people as well, and anything that you wanted to add, and really sort of maybe ways that you've seen this applied in various regions, and sort of what kind of engagement. I'm trying to approach this from a bioregions perspective, to do this kind of in Poland, to do a grassroots sort of bottom-up approach to identify the needs, to identify the challenges that are being faced, and how to really engage in this, for many people, this very new model for this level of data collection and monitoring, in a very new way of farming. And I was just curious about examples that you maybe have seen, organizations. Yeah, it's practical tools to this, perhaps.
Thank you, Mark. If Rachel, I think, was sharing something, I mean, yes,
I
please.
can give a very quick. So, Mark, I think one of the things that we're really starting to do now, and in a way it sounds almost ridiculous that we're going back to this, but we're going back, in that we are really sitting down around a kitchen table with the farmers, and we are defining with them what practices are they using and what practices are they interested in implementing in order to reach some of these goals. And it's an advisory role to a certain extent, but actually it's scientists relearning, understanding which practices, and then linking that, in my case, to soil health, to multifunctionality, and then having that follow-up conversation of, okay, these are the practices that you're currently doing, these are the ones you're willing to implement, these are then the indicators that we would recommend that you can start implementing, be it very practical approaches, so the result-based, where, if they sow a species-rich grassland, for example, how many species do they see there? If they start with 9 species in their species-rich grassland, do they still have 9 species after a year? Are they down to 6? Are they down to 2? Which groups are missing? Because there are very simple things, farm-based methodologies that they can go out and evaluate themselves, and have, their sort of own way of tracking the transition that they're going to. But perhaps at the end of it, what they want to know is there a change in soil biodiversity? Well, that's an outcome-based measure where we would go and take samples and actually assess that in the laboratory. So I mean, I can give you many different examples that relate back to the management practices. And I think Andrea said it earlier on, or maybe Dawn, it was you, I'm not sure, but I really think we have to go back to connecting indicators to practices, and to understanding how those two are intertwined. Because we really took a step back and went quite abstract and said, what is the minimum we can collect? How can we be most cost efficient in many ways in order to just have a baseline that we can judge against? but that's not useful to land managers on the ground who really want to know what's happening.
When you say connect practices with outcomes, you mean know what outcomes are expected when you apply 1, 2, 3 practices, etc. Is this what you mean?
Yeah, so what we do is we define goals. For example, within soil health, we can get them to look at the different soil functions, or you could be wanting to minimize soil threats, for example. Then we say, okay, what are the current practices and which practices will you implement in order to reach those goals that you want to achieve? Be it improving water regulation, be it increasing biodiversity, so on and so forth. And from that, we can then link the measures to those practices and the outcome measures to the functionality or the goals that they're setting through the combination of practices, because that's the other thing. It's not just one, it's always a combination. And actually, that's the trickiest part, is knowing which are the levers in those combinations of practices that really have the effect. And I'm not sure we're entirely there yet.
Yeah. If I may just quickly add one thing, and then I think Jean-Philippe is waiting for intervene. But what I think is that we need now to be, I mean, there has been several discussions about which practices you should implement. This practice is regenerative, the other is conservation farming, the other one is organic, the other, it's all about practices, which to me makes sense. It's somehow it's somehow some instructions also for a farmer. I mean, how do you want to achieve this outcome? Then you have to do these practices, right? But I think as I think Edona is telling this in the chat. So what really matters is the outcome in the end. So how do you get to the outcome is something that really changes a lot depending on the context, on the agro-environmental pedoclimatic conditions and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's about combination of practices, not just one or another practice. There are several trade-offs if you consider single practices, while the holistic approach is what is really is the matter.
Yeah.
So I would say, as soon as we don't get to a really robust way of measuring the outcome, here I see a huge risk of somehow saying, okay, let's go to the outcome, don't think about the practice. And then if you are not able to quantify the outcome, then anyone can claim it's regenerative, right?
Yeah.
I think
yeah.
If I may, I mean, I think our two farmers here are exactly on that front, because, I mean, Lucas is trying to analyze in his field analysis exactly the combination of practices, as well as in his soil testing startup, put a lot of thought in not just collecting data for some ESG profile of some company, but collecting the soil data that helps the farmer to farm more with nature. So maybe, and then also after with the BSAG, you collect a lot of data. So maybe first, Lucas, you can share with us a little bit your thoughts on how to do this observation of the combination of practices and do data collection that serves the farmer.
Yeah. Well, about outcome-based, I mean, what I'm doing at university, where I'm working on is always soil organic carbon. So it's all about soil organic carbon. Can we measure soil organic carbon, and can we precisely tell at the end, is there a gain? Is there soil carbon sequestration or not? And well, it's actually, I have to say, we can do it in our research, but that's pretty complex. I mean, we have soil samples going 1 meter in depth. We have assessing bulk density also, and fractioning soil organic carbon, and doing RTK measurements. So with a precise positioning, and all of that is not that easy to handle when you do it on a bigger scale for a lot of farmers. So it will be too expensive actually. So that's, and also it's when we talk about soil organic carbon, it's always what's the starting point. If you're already quite forward, it's not easy to gain soil organic carbon. That's why we should look on our other measurements, which more likely to are there to describe the quality and not only the quantity that we have with soil organic carbon. So the quality, what I do in the testing is like different measurements that are linked to microbes in soil. So we do measurements on water extractable organic carbon, water extractable organic nitrogen, and also we do CO2 respiration tests. So indirectly testing how active are the microbes. And when we put out those three measurements together, we can tell pretty accurately, is it what you're doing, is it good for your soil? Might it be good for your yield, and also might it be good for your biodiversity in soil, or are you going the wrong way? And those are measurements which are cheap, so it's quite cheap. So it would be something where many farmers could go for. We always need to look on that we can scale it up, and that's really important. Though it's not only about microbes in soil and not only about organic carbon, it's also about nutrients in soil. So when it doesn't help anything when you have the right community of microbes, but you do have like a deficiency in calcium in some minerals or in some minor elements like boron or anything like that. So that's also important. It's not that easy as you see, but maybe you can yeah.
Well, thanks. If I may continue shortly for what Lucas just said, to scale up that monitoring, it could be done by utilizing remote sensing and modeling what we've done in a carbon action project, and also working for a startup which develops a novel method to monitor soil organic carbon stock and changes. So there is one application, of course, on a field scale, and a precision with more precise scale. We need ground truth measurements, but all this combined gives us possibilities to scale up. What I would like to add here on this data discussion is that already now there's a lot of data coming in and forms through implements and, for example, harvesters. But what we are lacking currently is actually the tools and applications that refine the data for the farmer to use it for the decision making. So, for example, to prevent soil compaction in moist conditions with heavy machinery, which is common in most of the farms. So there should be more work to do between the science and the farmer to refine that data to more utilizable way. But of course, the key is that when we produce the data, we ask, why is it for and for whom is it for?
Thank you, Juuso. I think also maybe you can just give us 2 words on the BSAG. I mean, you would also with the Helsinki University collecting a lot of data and different, just so people get an idea of the scope of that program.
Yeah, in a Baltic Session group, the Carbon Action project started with 100 pilot farmers who had trial plots on their farm since 2018, a 5-year project which just ended, and we are now putting all the data together and refining it for the farmers. It was mostly about the soil carbon sequestration, the stocks, and farmers choose the different practices. I can share an article about that later to the chat. And the main outcome was actually what the farmers learned from their peers, and the highest learning curve was maybe for the scientists. They learned very lot from the farming and the farmers. And what I would like to raise up here on this general theme is we should participate farmers more into research and policy making. That is very crucial to create data and decisions that are relevant for the actors here at farmers.
Thank you, Juuso. With the Jan Philip has been waiting very long, please.
Yes, thank you, Simon, and thank you for the very interesting conversation. If I go back to this question of how can policy making support a more fertile conditions for regenerative agriculture, then I have a bit of a zoom out, maybe remark or question, which is when I'm looking at policy making right now, and well, we had the election of Trump right now, I can see that the coordinates of how we talk about policy making are shifting right now. So it is perhaps less about facts, and it is more about, okay, how as a politician, even more, will I get re-elected, right? And we're talking about the paradigm shift about regenerative agriculture, but there's maybe also a paradigm shift in how we go about policy making, which can actually question the very approach of looking at facts and figures. So, secondly, it was mentioned before, the risk of a reductionist approach, just using facts and figures. I think like carbon sequestration, for example, also there, obviously the kind of short-term gains will win over the longer-term gains if we think in terms of electoral cycles, and perhaps also this kind of narrowing down regenerative agriculture just to agricultural policy making. I see a risk that this is just that this kind of quantification of regenerative agriculture then could perhaps lead to a blindness to other, kind of looking at other areas of policy making that is not just agriculture. So it's a bit of a big picture perspective, but just to share maybe the risk of if we talk about how to approach policy making, to also to have both, actually. I mean, we have a right and a left brain hemisphere, right? So there is space for facts and figures, but there is also this part of culture, of storytelling, of the societal contribution a farm is part of, and also the policy maker we're approaching, who has perhaps also motivations that are not just facts and figures. So maybe a little plaidoyer for a holistic approach, but I'm sure you're also doing this. So I just wanted to mention this.
Thank you, Philip. Yeah, I think we can do another session on parliamentary politics and Regenerative. But maybe I would just pass it over to Wouter, as we are also coming to an end, and Wouter hasn't so much participated yet. I think in the Netherlands we have quite some experience in that, in trying to buy out farmers out of their exploitative production approach, and now you're taking another approach, which is basically rather trying to learn with them to regrow ecosystems, and as you yourself said, come from the eco-efficiency to the eco-effectiveness. So maybe you can share some experience how you are now working so closely with the government.
Yeah, well, let me nuance it a bit that this proposal was granted by the previous government. But I do think that if we aim at so combining it with a future fit farmer business model is and I really think that in the long run, if farmers don't develop regenerative farm models or eco-friendly, eco-effective agriculture models, in the long run, then also economically, that's a big issue. So I think we need to combine and tell the story and build the story and create the evidence that eco-friendly or eco-effective and regenerative farm models are also the most future fit economically. And that resonates, at least also with government today. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I mean,
having said it, we stay away from so in our program, it's really built on developing what is future fit, and it's not aimed at well. There are a lot of things happening in the Netherlands in Dutch agriculture that are not future fit, but that's not what we are focusing on. That's because if you then you make it political if you start focusing on that.
Thank you, Wouter. Yeah, in Germany, we, for example, also have in Saxony, one of our states, one might say the longest in reactionary government, the most progressive policies for agroforestry.
Yeah.
As also self-identification, and now we just had it in the pre-talks to this talk in the US. There will be a president with an agricultural minister who even ran a presidential campaign on regenerative agriculture. So there is a lot of stuff to uncover. We want to be extremely respectful and grateful for all of your time. So we want to finish on time. Maybe each of you one line finisher to send us home if you think what is the opportunity. So we learn to think of opportunities, not of crisis, of the regenerative paradigm, either in policy making or in science. You can choose. And Rachel, how about you start us off?
I think we have a lot of opportunity because of renewed interest, actually, in how we manage our systems, and also therefore renewed interest in how we can measure and monitor those systems and how we can make sure that we get it right. And so I think we should jump upon that opportunity to really do a good job and provide farmers, but also value chains and also policymakers with the right tools to really be able to define by the context. I think that's most important.
Thank you, Rachel. Juuso, you want to go next?
Thanks. I think our opportunity is to offer a holistic approach to this, both science and policy making, instead of this micromanagement that is currently done.
Wonderfully put. I think all our farmers would sign to that right away. Lucas, you want to go next?
Well, then I gonna say something about science. Yeah, well, I would say we have in science, we have a really big opportunity, or we should be able to assess together with the farmers what are the measures they want to go for and how can we measure it. And we should continue with on-farm research. The more, well, yeah, the more we do it, the better it gets, and the more we will stay there and at the end and can say, okay, here we have we can tell you we make things better when we go for that, because we have it published in Science.
Thank you, Lucas. Andrea, how about you?
Yeah, I would just highlight what, my point of view is we really need as scientists, but I think it's a collaborative job. I mean, scientists and farmers and then of course policymakers, etc. I mean, we need to sit and say, okay, what would be minimum set of metrics, indicators that we should look at with the farmers in the farms, and of course these indicators must be easy to measure, not expensive to measure. I mean, we cannot think about that any farmer should go every month to a lab. I mean, probably this is not the way forward. So if you think of a large scale, right? So we need indicators that are correlated to many other indicators, because the approach would always have to be very broad. You need to assess at the same time soil health, biodiversity, water, etc., right? And resources. You need always all this broad view to say that you really are doing the ecological transition. So we need somehow to decide what are the indicators that represent the others, what are the proxies that we may choose to represent this transition. This is, to me, vital, because otherwise we go back to this approach that is practice-based. So, I mean, these regenerative practices, I already hate this word, this expression. It's not practices, it's regenerative. It means you are regenerating. So let's look at the outcome, right?
So I would, if I can summarize it, so let's collaborate to make sure that the EU Commission's sustainability benchmarking takes our learnings from the soil monitoring and resilience law and the stuff you're working on. So we'll create something that doesn't end up in micromanagement, as you used to say. Wouter, how about you?
Well, I think the opportunity is the paradigm shift. In the end, the paradigm shift happens in people's minds. And I think if we build evidence and show more and more stories that outcomes can be achieved, that regeneration is possible, well, the more we show, the more people will make that shift in their mind.
Wonderful. And last but certainly not least, Dawn.
Great. I think I can summarize my position fairly quickly, which is that from a policy perspective, providing incentives for planning and decision support provides, as a core practice itself, is a key to actually generating the baseline data for outcomes-based measurement, outcomes-based claims later. So I think from my perspective, it's really investing in the technical support to generate data-driven decision-making support, and supporting the kind of project process that Rachel mentioned at the kitchen table, so that we can make those claims credible later on and create incentive programs based on those. Thanks.
Thank you, Dawn, and thank you for everyone joining tonight. Thank you, Virginia, for organizing everything and weaving everything together. We wish you all a very good night or a happy day wherever you are, and let's grow out these opportunities.
Bye. Thank you all.
Bye, and thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Good night.
Thank you all.
Good night.